Hi, this is Chris at Clever Unicorn Games and the Unicorn Collective, back with another one of our interviews. Today I have Rustan Hakansson with us. How are you doing today?
It's good. And as you can already see, we have been talking a bit before and having a great time.
Yes. Um, let's get into these questions. I mean, yeah, this interview was kind of supposed to happen a couple of hours ago, but we ended up chatting. So let's go. What do you like to do with your spare time when you're not designing or playing games?
I enjoy playing volleyball. I'm over 2 meters tall, and playing volleyball, I have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, I'm up there as well. I've never played volleyball though. I used to be quite good at basketball when we played it at school. The height helped, but yeah, volleyball. What?
Volleyball, biking, rollerblading, stuff like that.
So active, do a lot of outdoorsy stuff.
I like to when I can. Less since the kids were born 10 years ago, my first kid. So before that, I was more active and outdoors, but I, I I try and I enjoy it when I can. So now it's beach volleyball season, but right now it's raining here. It's been a fine, very good period before, but right now it's raining. So no volleyball today. Otherwise, it would have been beach volleyball today for me tonight.
That is something that you don't normally associate with Sweden. That's funny because you'd always think it'd be too cold up in Sweden to be on the beach playing volleyball.
I have friends who are very, very high in the international leagues of playing beach volleyball, and it is good. It's fun.
So, what would you say? And this will be a hard one. It is for me anyway when I ask it myself. What is your favorite board game?
Yeah, if you can classify chess as a board game, then it's that. I played a lot of chess over the years, both in clubs and in serious games, and playing online. I played on a server called Fix Free Chess before, and now I play on Lee Chess, and it's fully open source. I'm into open source stuff, and it's a fully open source server, and I like it very much. And there's a lot of fun stuff going on there. So I think I played 15,000 games on Lee Chess now, and I played probably 25,000 games on Fix before, and I played since I was 6 years old. So by any measure, by amount of games played, I should definitely classify chess as my favorite one.
Yeah,
Otherwise, of normal games, games that I really like to play when I can are Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Ring. But both big, heavy two-player games that I played both of them likely more than 30 times.
what kind of games or what game inspired you to start making games?
So Nations was not my first published game, but it's the one that has the most clear influence from another game. So that was playing the first edition of Through the Ages, and then working with Vlada to make a revised version of Through the Ages, and then finally deciding that okay, now Vlada had another vision for how where he wanted to take Through the Ages, and then we split up, uh, and then made Nations to be our own game and change it in many many ways compared to what we were working on for um, doing the variant or the extension or whatever we were about to do together with Vlada. And as can be seen by the new edition of Through the Ages, Vlada did not have the same direction in mind as we had when with Nations.
Yeah, I never played the first edition of Through the Ages, but I do like the second edition a lot. But I would play Nations over it, for many reasons, in fact. So, yeah, you went the right way. I'll say that.
I
And so,
bought one of the first 500 copies of the special edition without any issues. Otherwise, the Eagle Griffin version of Through the Ages had a bunch of problems. I really knew about them because at the time I was working distribution and I handled part of the European distribution of both the original sales and the replacement sets for those large stacks of cardboard that was just okay. Let's replace most of the game with these new cards that are actually fixed. So yeah.
what would you say that your games design style is?
I like to make clean games where you can actually remember the full set of rules. They do not need to be super easy or simple. It's just that they must feel natural. They must be so that you don't need to reference the rulebook fully all the time. You shouldn't shuffle through the rulebook and try to find where is the rule for this thing and try to remember all the exceptions and things. If there is something that is an exception, it needs to be clear in front of you on a card, for example, and it should show what the details are of that. You should not need to remember and reference charts and stuff in the rulebook. I want games to be clean and clear.
Yeah, no, brilliant. That is a very important thing to remember. Yeah, people do not want to go back and have to keep looking in the rule book to look up rules, especially rules they've already looked up but then forgotten because they weren't intuitive with the game. So yeah, I like that answer. When coming up with a game, where do you start first?
It depends a lot on the type of project, and there are many ways to start them. The it can be from an IP or like a computer game, like I did with City Skylines. I had a computer game to base the game on, and now after I did City Skylines, I'm working with several different publishers and computer game publishers of okay, how can we make a good board game out of this computer game? And then that is a clear start that we have this existing computer game or this existing IP, and how can you transfer this into an interesting board game? And what direction should it take, and how does it fit with the publisher that is already um, an established publisher, or in some cases, the board game publisher is not known from the start. But let's try to find out who would be the best publisher to work with this IP, with this computer game. So that is one way to start it. Uh, Another way is that is very common for me when I work on a game and try to um, distill it to its core and try to take away stuff that is not important enough. They don't um, they are interesting, but they add complexity that they do not add value for in the same way. So I try to test to take away most things from my games and see, does the game still work? Is it still at its core the same game? Is it still as interesting if I take away this thing? And most of the things cannot be taken away really, and add some problem when they are taken away. But some can be done. Some can be taken away, and still the game is as interesting. And then they should probably be taken away because they add complexity that is not necessary. But when things that are core to the game are taken away, you can see that, oh yeah, this broke the game completely. But even though it needs to be put back, you might learn something from it, like why did the game break down right now when I took this thing away, or I twisted it in this direction. Then you often learn something, and you should really try hard to polish the game as much as you can. Otherwise, making a half-ass job and polishing it to 90%, that is not really good enough. To have a chance in the marketplace today, you need to do the final polishing as well, and make sure that all the effort you put into it up to that point are really spent well. If you do not spend the final amount of time to make the game as great as it can be, then you're really most likely wasted the other uh, effort you put into the project. But when in that project process, when filing down and polishing things, things that do not fit, they get split away, and often I cannot really let go of them. I think, okay, this was interesting for a reason. I had it in there because I had some vision for what this component should do, and then it might spin off a new idea, a new project that I can I will think about it until I really write it down and think about all the aspects of how could this be used. And it can transform into something completely different, or it can stay the same and be a core idea for a new project. But I need to attach it to some theme or some thought or some interaction or something that is becomes the new core of that idea.
In your experience of taking a game from your brain and then getting it to the gamers at the end, what barrier or barriers have you come up against or hurdles and thought, oh, how am I going to get past this? And then how did you overcome those barriers? See if you can think of one or two times when it's been exceptionally hard.
With nations, one of the big things was the amount of images needed for the illustrations. Um, yeah, if you have a lot of cards and a lot of different cards, it becomes hard to finance the illustration work, and that was one of the things that the publisher was hesitant about. And okay, they liked the game, but they thought that it was too expensive to do the art. So we found an illustrator that could do it, and then the publisher accepted it. So even though some people think that the nation's illustrations are not as good as they can be, and yeah, sure, they can absolutely have been better, but the alternative might have been that the game did not happen at all.
Yes, people don't realize that, yeah, the biggest part of them taking a game anyway, be it Kickstarter or even going to a publisher, these days publishers are going to want you to have done a lot of the groundwork already going in, and art can be a big part of that. And that is probably the most expensive part of making a game these days, or getting it to the point where you're ready to produce it. Art is the biggest thing, and that's something that people need, don't really understand, I think, when they go into it, how much the artwork does cost, and it can cost thousands and thousands normally.
Otherwise, there are many things that can cause issues, and finding ways to round it is that is what you constantly do. Like, okay, now we get a limit of components from the publisher. This thing costs too much. Find another way to do it. Or like with City Skylines, I got a request from Cosmos to do a promo thing that it should fit on a postcard. Like, okay, it's a single postcard that has this exact size. You have the front, you have the back. This is what you can do. Can you do something that is of this complexity level that we can use in stores of this type? And then I have a very strict specification. This is what I can do. And my normal approach to stuff like that is to make a lot of different ones. And for this specific project, I did 8 of them, and then had a discussion with my editor, Wolfgang, there, who we spoke about what is the most suitable of these and tested them, and then selected one. And thankfully both he and I thought that the one specific one of them was the best, and then that was done. um, Otherwise it can be a discussion that if someone thinks one aspect is a lot better, it can be easier as a designer to just test them yourself and then choose one and only present that one. But I try to do many variations and try to present them all.
Have you ever played a game, and you don't have to name it, have you ever played a game you didn't like, and what was it that you didn't like about the game? Was it the mechanic or the theme? What put you off it?
Oh, I have played so many bad games. I have been working in distribution, and working in distribution, there is, or at least at that time, I tried to be very thorough. Now it's even harder because more games are coming out. But I started working in distribution in 2005. And at that time, it was possible to know about all new releases coming out, at least on some level. So before I went to Essen, before I went to Nuremberg, I checked out all the new releases that were going to be presented and checked which ones were interesting for us to take in, and which ones did I want to take in a small number of, which ones could be interesting to take in bigger numbers of. And many of them were with the publishers that we already had agreements with, and I didn't really need to look at the specific games in detail. But especially for new smaller publishers, I needed to talk in or check them out in more detail and get in touch with them. So there was a whole number of classifications to do, and then going there, talking to them, and say, okay, give me a 1 minute presentation on this one. And then after 1 minute, I had a decision point. Should I ask for 1 minute more of presentation, go into a bit more detail, or was it enough? Did I know enough to order of it, or did I want a copy of it to test and see, is this something we should push for more? Is this something that could be interesting for localization, for translating it to make your own print run of it, or do I want to see a bit more of the actual game? See a couple of rounds of it right now, and that was just for every game, decision, 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 all the time. And after going to Essen or Nuremberg, my mind was just blown. Having looked over several hundred games in that way, it's exhausting. And many of the games that I tested and tried were not good. And then I did not want to push them into stores. So at least I, at that point, worked as a sort of filter for what games we pushed out into stores and tried to avoid the ones that were not going to likely be enjoyed by the stores that we worked with. But yeah, I've tried a lot, and there can be so many things. But mostly, you need to have the right game for the right group. And one game can be a catastrophe with one group and be fantastic with another. And it's good that there are so many gamers nowadays that there is space for many games. And I personally do not need to like all games, and I'm very happy for that.
Yep. No, that's a very diplomatic but a good answer. Um, why is it that you make games? What is it that drives you to make games?
Because my brain burns with ideas. I have a very hard time to stop thinking about games. It is the simplest explanation. I need to get them out of my head, and a way to do that is to just write down all the ideas I have for them. But when I find things that I'm excited about, I just cannot stop working on them. And even if I at some point do some other job that is like my this is my full-time job, I'm going to be do something else, I will likely not be able to stop working on games, even if they are just for myself and to see how they work and to tinker with them. I will not likely be able to stop.
Has the state of the world at present affected how you are designing games?
Mm, Games that have been published, not so much, but games that I would like to do, yes. I have, as a back burner project, I've been wanting to do more serious games about pushing the limit of what board games do in society and make them more into something that can actually interact and affect society. There is one game called Kolejka that is about standing in a queue in 80s Poland that has been successful in promoting understanding of how it was to some extent to live in a situation like that in a way that is hard to learn from just reading a book. And there are many, many themes that I would like to work with um, in the same way to be more serious games. And I've had so far no success in finding a publisher to do this kind of line. I've spoken to a couple of publishers, but all of them have said that no, this is a good idea. I really hope that you can make this work and find someone to do it, but it will interfere with our normal how we want to be seen. We want to be seen as a company where you play games to have fun and not s- um, this serious approach, this problematic approach to really try to understand the society that we're living in. And um, if I'm able to invest the time without knowing there is a publisher for it, it might be easier to actually get a publisher to do it. But working on this full time, I need to prioritize things that I already have a publisher that wants to do.
What is it that you're working on right now, if you can say?
Yeah, computer game tie-ins to some extent. Nations, new project that I cannot talk much about is one of the big ones, but I have like 8 different projects that I'm actively working on. Can't really talk much about them except saying that Nations is one of them that we're working on. I try to not have more than 10 active at any point because it becomes too much of a hassle to try to schedule them all. But I need to have, in addition to these that I'm working on actively, I have a bunch that are more sketches that I have made for publishers that have asked for specific things, and then waiting for approval or checking or updating them, and they don't really count before they are a playable prototype. They exist, but they don't use up that much brain capacity already.
What would be one piece of advice that you would give a new designer thinking of starting in the business? They've got this idea in their head. What piece of advice would be from you to them before they start creating?
The normal advice that I give is just for your first game, just power through. Make sure it happens some way or another. Get your first game published so you can see how it works and have that experience. It gets a lot easier to talk to publishers if you have at least one game published already. It doesn't really matter all that much how it is published. It's just that you follow through and it becomes a finished product that is actually sold in stores, that is in the hands of gamers, that you can see their reaction of. It is not the same thing if you do print on demand and print like 10, 20 copies and get some friends to play it. That doesn't really count. You need to make a real production run and get it sold. Then you have seen the whole process, and it becomes a lot easier to approach publisher or know about how do you want to proceed, how do you want to take your next game on, and just try to learn as much as you can and make sure you find some way to get your first game published. Then it becomes a bit easier.
Well, that was brilliant, Rustan. Thank you very much for coming and talking to me today
Thank you.
for all however many hours it's been, which won't go into this interview because I didn't record. But thank you very much.
You're welcome.